I never woke up one morning and decided to cheat. That's the part one keep going back to. There was no plan. No moment where I thought, today, I'm going to ruin my relationship. It was quieter than that. Slower. Almost reasonable. I met him at work. Ethan. New hire. Same department. Sat 2 desks away. At first, he was just another coworker. Someone you nod at in the morning, maybe exchange a few polite words with during lunch. Nothing more. I had been with my boyfriend, Alex, for 4 years at that point. Stable. Comfortable. Predictable. We weren't unhappy. But we also weren't anything else. No fights. No passion. No surprises. Just routine. Ethan didn't disrupt that right away. That would have been obvious. Instead, it started small. Hey, do you know where the meeting room is? Do you understand what they meant in that email? Want coffee? I'm heading out anyway. Normal things. Safe things. He was easy to talk to. That was the first thing I noticed. Not in a flirtatious way. Just easy. Like conversations didn't require effort. Like I didn't have to think about what I was saying or how I was coming across. And I didn't realize how much I missed that. At home, conversations with Alex had become efficient. What do you want for dinner? Did you pay the bill? What time are you getting back? Functional. Necessary. Empty. With Ethan, things lingered. A joke would turn into a story. A question would turn into a conversation. A 5-minute coffee break would turn into 20. I noticed it. Of course I did. But I didn't label it as anything dangerous. Because nothing had happened. That became my logic. My safety net. We started messaging outside of work. At first, it was work-related. Did you finish that report? Do you remember what time the meeting is tomorrow? Then it wasn't. Did you see that email? That was brutal. Long day. Then. You always stay late? I should have noticed the shift. I did notice it. I just didn't stop it. Because it still felt harmless. One night, Alex fell asleep early. I was on the couch, scrolling, half paying attention to a show. My phone buzzed. Ethan. You ever feel like your day just blends into the next? I stared at the message longer than I should have. It wasn't inappropriate. It wasn't flirty. But it wasn't neutral either. Yeah, I replied. All the time. That was the first conversation that didn't feel like work. We talked for almost an hour. About nothing specific. Just life. Routine. That feeling of being stuck without being unhappy enough to change anything. At one point, he said, "You don't seem like someone who'd settle for that." I don't know why that stuck with me. But it did. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. And that's where it started. Not with a kiss. Not with a touch. But with a conversation I didn't need to have. And a reply I didn't need to send. I didn't mean to cheat. But I also didn't stop the moment it became something more. And looking back now, that moment came a lot earlier than I wanted to admit. If you had asked me then, I would have told you nothing was happening. And technically, I would have been right. No dates. No touching. No secrets that felt serious enough to count. Just conversations. But the frequency changed. That's how it starts. Not intensity, consistency. Good morning texts. Not every day. But often enough to feel intentional. Surviving Monday? You alive over there? I never questioned why he was texting me before work. I never asked myself why I was replying immediately. It just became normal. At work, we started gravitating toward each other without acknowledging it. Same lunch breaks. Same coffee runs. Same quiet understanding that if one of us stood up, the other would follow. People noticed. Not in a confrontational way. Just small comments. You two are always together. You're basically a team now. I laughed it off. Of course I did. Because if you laugh, it doesn't sound real. But I started being more aware of it. More careful. Which should have been a warning. Instead, I treated it like something to manage. Not something to stop. At home, nothing changed. And that was the problem. Alex was still. Alex. Kind. Reliable. Consistent. He'd ask about my day. I'd say it was fine. And that would be it. I didn't mention Ethan. Not because I was hiding anything. But because there was no reason to bring him up. That's what I told myself. But then one night, Alex asked something simple. Who are you texting? I looked down at my phone. Ethan's name on the screen. Just work, I said. It wasn't entirely a lie. But it wasn't the truth either. Alex nodded and went back to what he was doing. No suspicion. No follow-up. And for some reason, that made it easier. Because I realized something in that moment. I could keep this separate. That thought should have scared me. Instead, it felt convenient. The conversations with Ethan got longer. More personal. We started talking about things that didn't belong in casual workplace chats. Family. Past relationships. Regrets. One evening, he asked, "Are you happy?" I didn't answer right away. Because the honest answer wasn't simple. "Yeah," I eventually typed. "I think so." There was a pause. Then, "That's not a yes." I stared at the screen. Because he wasn't wrong. And the fact that he could see that through a message. That he noticed something I hadn't even said out loud. That did something to me. It made the connection feel real. That was the shift. Not when we started texting. Not when we started spending time together. But when he became someone who understood things about me that my boyfriend didn't. Or at least, that's how it felt. A few days later, we stayed late at work. Everyone else had left. The office was quiet. Almost too quiet. We were sitting across from each other, laptops open, barely working. "You ever feel like you're just going through the motions?" he said. I looked up. "Yeah." Silence. Then he smiled slightly. "Good." I thought it was just me. Something about that moment felt different. Heavier. Closer. And for the first time, I noticed how close we were sitting. Not touching. Not even close. But aware. That's the thing no one tells you. You don't cross a line all at once. You just keep stepping closer to it. Until one day, you realize you're already standing on the other side. And no matter how harmless it looks, you got there on purpose. If you asked me to point to the exact moment things changed, I could. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was clear. It was a Friday. Late again. But this time, we didn't even pretend to be working. Laptops closed. Lights dimmed. Just the two of us sitting across from each other like there was nowhere else we needed to be. "You don't rush home," he said casually. It wasn't an accusation. Just an observation. "I don't have to," I replied. Technically true. Emotionally, not exactly. "What's that like?" he asked. I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He leaned back in his chair, watching me. "Being in something that steady," he said. "No chaos. No uncertainty." I hesitated. Because I knew what he was really asking. "It's comfortable," I said. He smiled faintly. "That's not the same as good." That sentence stayed in the air longer than it should have. Because I didn't disagree. And that was the moment something inside me shifted. Not because of him. Because of me. I started seeing my relationship differently after that. Not worse. Just clearer. Comfort started to feel like stagnation. Routine started to feel like repetition. Stability started to feel like something I had settled for instead of chosen. None of that was entirely fair. But it didn't stop it from feeling real. That night, as we were getting ready to leave, he walked beside me toward the exit. Close. Closer than usual. Our hands brushed. Light. Accidental. But neither of us moved away immediately. That pause. That split second where we both noticed. That's where the line disappeared. Because from that moment on, it wasn't unintentional anymore. Outside, the air felt colder than it should have. Or maybe I just felt more aware. "You're overthinking something," he said. I laughed lightly. "I do that." "No," he said, stepping slightly closer. "This is different." I looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, there was no pretending this was just friendship. There was something else there. Something we both understood without saying it. "You should go," he added quietly. That surprised me. "Why?" He held my gaze for a second. Then, "Because if you don't, this stops being harmless." That was the last clean exit I had. A clear moment. A clear choice. And I knew it. I felt it. That internal pause where everything slows down just enough for you to decide who you're going to be. I should have left. Instead, I stayed. "I think it already stopped being harmless," I said. He didn't respond right away. Just watched me. Like he was making sure I understood what I was saying. Then, yeah, he said quietly. That was it. No dramatic move. No sudden kiss. Just acknowledgement. But somehow, that felt even more irreversible. Because now, there was no ambiguity left. We both knew. And once two people know, it's not an accident anymore. That night, when I got home, Alex was asleep on the couch. TV still on. Lights still dim. I stood there for a second, looking at him. At the life I had. And, for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt distant. Like I was already somewhere else. And the worst part? I wasn't trying to come back. After that night, everything accelerated. Not in a chaotic way. In a quiet, inevitable way. There was no more pretending. No more, this is just work. No more lines we hadn't crossed. We didn't talk about it directly. We didn't need to. But the way he looked at me changed. And the way I responded. That changed too. The messages became different. Shorter, but heavier. You okay? Thinking about yesterday. We shouldn't. That last one stayed on my screen longer than anything else. We shouldn't. I didn't reply right away. Because I knew what the right answer was. You're right. That's what I should have said. Instead, I typed. I know. That was enough. Because I know doesn't stop anything. It just acknowledges it. At work, we were more careful. Less obvious. More distance when others were around. But when we were alone, that distance disappeared instantly. It became a pattern. Find moments. Create space. Stay just within the limits of what could still be explained. Until we didn't. It happened again late. Not planned. Not discussed. Just familiar. Everyone had left. Lights low. Silence that didn't feel empty anymore. We were standing closer this time. No desks between us. No distractions. You're still here, he said quietly. So are you. A pause. Then. You should go. Again. Another chance. And again. I didn't take it. Do you actually want me to? I asked. That was the moment. The shift from passive to intentional. He didn't answer right away. Just stepped slightly closer. Close enough that I could feel the change in the air between us. No, he said. And that was it. No build-up. No dramatic escalation. Just a decision. When he touched me, it wasn't rushed. Not impulsive. Careful. Like we both understood exactly what this meant. And that made it worse. Because there was no loss of control to blame. I didn't freeze. I didn't hesitate. I leaned into it. And that's the part one can't rewrite. Not the moment itself. But the fact that I chose it. Completely. Everything after that felt quieter than I expected. Not overwhelming. Not chaotic. Just real. Like something that had been building for weeks had finally reached the point it was always going to reach. Afterward, we didn't say much. We didn't need to. Because there was nothing left to define. It was already clear. I remember sitting there for a second, not moving. Just thinking. Not about Alex. Not about consequences. Just about how easy it had been. That's what stuck with me. Not how wrong it was. How natural it felt. And that realization? That scared me more than anything else. Because it meant this wasn't a mistake. It was something I had been moving toward. Step by step. For a long time. When I got home, Alex was awake this time. Sitting at the table. Scrolling on his phone. Hey, he said, glancing up. You're late. Work, I replied. He nodded. No questions. No suspicion. Just trust. And for the first time that night, I felt something close to guilt. But even then, not enough to stop. I thought the hardest part would be the first time. It wasn't. The hardest part was how quickly it became manageable. That's what scared me. Not the secrecy. Not the risk. The routine. I started organizing my life in ways I never had before. Not out of panic. Out of efficiency. Work stayed the same on the surface. But underneath, there was a second layer. Unspoken schedules. Moments we both understood without planning. If a meeting ran late, we stayed. If people left early, we noticed. If there was even a small window, we took it. And the worst part? It didn't feel chaotic. It felt structured. At home, I adjusted just enough to keep things normal. Not distant enough to raise suspicion. Not engaged enough to feel real. I found that balance faster than I should have. Everything okay? Alex asked one night. Yeah, I said. And I meant it. That's what made it worse. Because I wasn't falling apart. I wasn't overwhelmed with guilt. I wasn't acting out of control. I was functioning perfectly. Better than before, even. I laughed more. Spoke more. Engaged more. Because part of me was energized. And that energy spilled into everything else. Alex noticed. You seem happier lately, he said casually one evening. I froze for a second. Not visibly, but enough to feel it. Just less stressed, I replied. He smiled slightly. That's good. And I nodded. Because from the outside, it was good. That's the lie no one prepares you for. Sometimes cheating doesn't break you immediately. Sometimes it makes you feel more alive. And that feeling? It's addictive. Ethan became part of my day without effort. Not just in the obvious ways. In the small ones. I'd catch myself thinking about something random. And wondering what he'd say. I'd see something funny. And instinctively reach for my phone. I started measuring moments by whether I could share them with him. That's when I realized. This wasn't just physical anymore. It hadn't been for a while. We didn't talk about what this is. We didn't need to. Because we both knew it had gone past anything temporary. One evening, we stayed later than usual. Not because we had to. Because we wanted to. You ever think about what happens if someone finds out? I asked. He didn't look worried. No, he said. That caught me off guard. Why not? He looked at me then. Calm. Direct. Because I'm not the one with something to lose. That landed harder than I expected. Because he was right. This wasn't equal. I was the one balancing something real. He wasn't. And yet, I was the one acting like I had control. That illusion stayed with me. Even later that night, when I got home and sat next to Alex on the couch. He leaned into me slightly. Natural. Unthinking. And for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I was starting to feel like two different people. And I wasn't sure which one was real anymore. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about hiding something. It was about becoming someone I didn't fully recognize. And learning how to maintain that version of myself without letting either side collapse. And somehow, I was doing it. Which meant one thing. I wasn't close to stopping. I was just getting better at it. The thing about living two lives is this. You don't notice the strain right away. You adapt. You optimize. You convince yourself it's sustainable. Until something small breaks the rhythm. It wasn't a big moment. No dramatic confrontation. No sudden discovery. It was a question. Do you want to come with me this weekend? Alex asked it casually, like he always did. To where? I said. My parents, he replied. They haven't seen you in a while. I paused. Just for a second. But it was enough. Because for the first time, I didn't instinctively say yes. I'll see, I said. That wasn't normal. And he noticed. You'll see, he repeated, a slight smile on his face, but not the relaxed kind. I just might have work stuff, I added quickly. He nodded. But slower than usual. Okay, he said. And just like that, something shifted. Not obvious. Not confrontational. But present. That weekend, I didn't go. I said I had deadlines. Things to finish. Technically true. Just not the real reason. Instead, I met Ethan. It wasn't planned out loud. But we both knew. That same quiet understanding. That same unspoken agreement. And this time, it didn't feel like sneaking around. It felt like choosing. We spent the afternoon together. No rush. No pressure. Just time. That was new. Because before, everything had been contained. Limited. Defined by circumstance. Now, it was intentional. At one point, we were just sitting there, not talking. You're thinking again, he said. Yeah. About him. I didn't answer. Because that would have made it too real. Instead, I asked, does this ever feel wrong to you? He didn't hesitate. No. That should have bothered me. But instead, it made things easier. Because if he didn't question it, I didn't have to either. That was the lie I leaned on. Later that night, I got home late. Later than I said I would. Alex was awake. Again. This time, he didn't say, "Hey," right away. He just looked at me. "You were working?" he asked. "Yeah." Another pause. "On a Saturday?" "It's been busy." He nodded. But something about it felt different. Not disbelief. Recognition. Like he wasn't hearing the words anymore. Just observing the pattern. "You've been working a lot lately," he said. "Yeah. You've also been somewhere else." There it was. Not a question. A statement. My chest tightened slightly. "I'm just tired," I said. Same answer. Same tone. But this time, it didn't land. He leaned back slightly, watching me. "Okay," he said. But it didn't mean okay. It meant he was starting to see it. That was the first real crack. Not because he knew, but because he no longer believed everything I said. And once that happens, you don't go back to normal. You just move closer to being found out. And the worst part? I knew that. I felt it. And I still didn't stop. The shift didn't happen all at once. It came from both directions. Slow, quiet, unavoidable. At home, Alex didn't ask more questions. That would have been easier to handle. Instead, he started noticing. The way I checked my phone. The way I answered too quickly. The way my attention slipped in and out of conversations. He didn't confront it. He just paid attention. And somehow that felt worse. "You've been on your phone a lot," he said one night. "Work," I replied. "Right." That right didn't mean agreement. It meant he was keeping track. Meanwhile, Ethan changed too. Not drastically. Not aggressively. Just more direct. "You're distracted lately," he said one afternoon. "I have a life outside of this," I replied. "I know," he said calmly. "But you're starting to act like this is just something you visit." That word, visit, hit harder than it should have. Because that's exactly what I had been doing. Treating him like a space I stepped into. Then left when it was convenient. "I told you from the beginning," he continued. "I'm not doing that." "I know." "Then don't." It sounded simple. But it wasn't. Because for the first time, I felt pressure from both sides. At home, I was expected to be present. With Ethan, I was expected to be honest. And I wasn't fully doing either. That's when the cracks started spreading faster. I began slipping. Small things at first. Answering messages at the wrong time. Forgetting what I had said earlier. Mixing up details. Nothing obvious. But enough to build tension. One night, my phone lit up while I was sitting next to Alex. "Ethan." I didn't pick it up immediately. But I saw Alex glance at the screen. Just for a second. "Who's that?" he asked. There it was. Simple question. But heavier than anything he'd said before. "Just work," I replied. Again. Same answer. But this time, he didn't nod. He just looked at me. Long enough for the silence to feel intentional. Then, "Okay." That word again. But now I understood what it meant. It meant he didn't believe me. And he was choosing not to push it. Yet, later that night, I checked my phone. 3 messages. "You there? You're ignoring me now? Or are you with him?" My chest tightened. That last one felt different. Not curious. Possessive. I typed back. "I was busy." Instant reply. "You're always busy when you're with him." There it was. The line I had been avoiding. Not just secrecy. Ownership. And suddenly, this didn't feel as controlled as it had before. Because I realized something. I wasn't balancing 2 lives anymore. I was being pulled between them. And neither side was willing to stay passive. The next morning, Alex said something that made everything worse. "We should go somewhere," he said. "What?" "Just us," he added. "A trip or something." It's been a while. My stomach dropped slightly. Because that wasn't random. That was him trying to fix something. Something I had already started breaking. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Maybe." He nodded. But I could tell. He was watching my reaction more than my answer. And that's when it hit me. I was running out of time. Not because I was about to get caught. But because both sides were about to demand something I couldn't give. A full version of me. And I didn't have one anymore. I expected it to fall apart in one moment. A confrontation. A message seen at the wrong time. A mistake I couldn't explain. Something sharp. Obvious. It didn't happen like that. It unraveled quietly. It started with distance. Not mine. Alex's. He didn't ask questions anymore. Didn't comment on my phone. Didn't try to pull me into conversations the same way. At first, I thought it was a good thing. Less pressure. Less risk. But then I noticed something else. He stopped trying. No more, "How was your day?" No more small touches in passing. No more casual plans. Just space. And it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like something slipping away. At the same time, Ethan stopped being patient. "You're still not saying anything," he said one evening. "About what?" I asked, even though I knew. "About us." That word again. Us. I stayed quiet. Because defining it would force a decision. And I wasn't ready to make one. "You can't just keep this in the middle," he continued. "That's not how this works." "It's been working," I said. "No," he replied calmly. "It's been existing." That hit harder than I expected. Because deep down, I knew he was right. This wasn't stable. It was just stretched out. That night, I got home earlier than usual. Alex was in the kitchen. He looked up when I walked in. "Hey, hey." We stood there for a second. Too aware. "Can we talk?" he said. My chest tightened. Not panic. Recognition. Because I knew what this was. Not a question. A conclusion. "Okay," I said. We sat down. Across from each other. Like strangers trying to remember how they got there. "I'm not going to ask if there's someone else," he said. That caught me off guard. "Why not?" "Because I think I already know." Silence. Heavy. "But that's not even the point anymore," he added. I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He looked at me. Calm. Clear. "You're not here," he said. That was it. No accusation. No anger. Just truth. "I am," I replied automatically. But even as I said it, I knew how empty it sounded. He shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "You're just physically present." That landed harder than anything else. Because it wasn't about what I did. It was about what I stopped being. "I've been trying to figure out when it changed," he continued. "And I think it didn't happen all at once." "Of course it didn't." "I think you left this a while ago," he said quietly. And there it was. Not discovery. Understanding. And somehow, that felt worse. Because it meant he saw it clearly. Even before I admitted it to myself. "I don't want to keep pretending this is still the same," he added. The room felt smaller. "Are you saying?" I started. "I'm saying we need to stop acting like this is working." That was it. No yelling. No drama. Just the end. Presented calmly. And for the first time since all of this started, I didn't feel in control. Not because I was caught. But because something real. Something stable. Was quietly walking away. Without me even trying to stop it. I thought that was the end. A calm, mutual realization. Something that would fade out quietly, the same way everything else had unraveled. I was wrong. Because the next part didn't come from Alex. It came from Ethan. I saw him the next day. Same office. Same space. But everything felt different. More exposed. More real. "You talked to him," he said as soon as we were alone. I nodded. "And?" "It's over," I said. There. Simple. Clean. For a second, he didn't react. Then, "Okay." That word again. But this time, it didn't feel neutral. It felt measured. "Okay." I repeated. "That's it." He looked at me. Not confused. Not relieved. Just steady. "What do you want me to say?" he asked. "I don't know," I replied. Something. A small pause. Then, "I told you I don't do halfway," he said. "I'm not halfway anymore," I pushed back. I ended it. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "You did." But something in his tone didn't match the words. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. He leaned back slightly, crossing his arms. "It means you didn't choose anything," he said. That hit harder than I expected. "I did," I said. "I chose to leave." "No," he replied calmly. "You waited until it fell apart." Silence. Because I couldn't argue with that. You didn't take a risk, he continued. You just followed where things were already going. I felt something shift. Not defensiveness. Recognition. But I'm here now, I said. Doesn't that count for something? Another pause. Then, that depends, he said. On what? On whether you're here because you want me, he said, or because you don't have anything else left. That landed deeper than anything else he'd said. Because for the first time, I didn't have an immediate answer. And he saw it. You see, he said quietly. That's the problem. I chose you, I insisted. No, he replied. You ended up here. The room felt smaller. Tighter. You think this is what I wanted? I asked. I think this is what you allowed, he said. That word again. Allowed. And suddenly, everything rewired in my head. Because he wasn't wrong. I hadn't made bold decisions. I hadn't taken control. I had just kept saying yes to the next step. Until there were no steps left. So what are you saying? I asked quietly. He looked at me. Calm. Certain. I'm saying I don't want to be the end result of something you never actually chose. Silence. And then, he stood up. No anger. No frustration. Just finality. Wait, I said. He paused. What happens now? I asked. He didn't hesitate. You figure out what you actually want, he said. And you're just leaving? He gave a small, almost tired smile. I was never staying, he said. And just like that, he walked away. No drama. No goodbye. Just gone. I stood there for a long time. Because in that moment, everything finally clicked. Not just what I did, but how I did it. I didn't lose control. I avoided it. I didn't make choices. I delayed them. And in the end, that cost me both directions. Not because I picked wrong, but because I never really picked at all. I thought the ending would feel louder. Something final. Something that matched the weight of everything that had happened. It didn't. It was quiet. No messages. No calls. No last conversations trying to make sense of things. Just absence. Alex didn't reach out. Not after that conversation. Not after everything settled. And I didn't either. Because there wasn't anything left to clarify. He had already understood the part one was still trying to explain to myself that I had been gone long before I admitted it. And Ethan. He didn't text. Didn't check in. Didn't leave the door open. He just meant what he said. I was never staying. At first, I told myself I needed time. Time to process. Time to figure things out. But the truth? There wasn't anything left to figure out. Just something to finally admit. I sat in my apartment one night, alone, no distractions, no noise. And for the first time since this started, I walked through it honestly. Not the events. The decisions. Every message I answered when I didn't need to. Every conversation I let go further than it should have. Every moment I noticed the shift and chose not to interrupt it. That's the part one kept avoiding. Because it's easier to call something a mistake. But this wasn't one moment. It was a pattern. A series of small permissions I gave myself. Until the outcome felt inevitable. I didn't mean for it to happen. That's what I kept telling myself. And technically, it was true. But there's a difference between not planning something and allowing it. And I allowed everything. I didn't lose control. I gave it up. That realization didn't break me. It just settled. Quiet. Heavy. Permanent. Weeks passed. Life didn't collapse. It just adjusted. Different routine. Different silence. Different version of myself. People say you learn from things like this. That you grow. And maybe that's true. But no one talks about this part. Sometimes growth doesn't feel like progress. It feels like awareness. And awareness doesn't fix anything. It just makes you unable to ignore what you've already done. I don't miss the chaos. I don't miss the tension. But I do notice something now. In every quiet moment. How easy it is to drift. How natural it is to justify. How quickly something small becomes something irreversible. If you don't stop it early. I thought cheating was a line. Something clear. Something obvious. But it's not. It's a direction. And once you start moving in it, you don't suddenly cross it. You just keep going. Until there's nothing left to go back to. So yeah, I didn't mean to cheat, but I also didn't stop it. And in the end, that made all the difference.